Hello and welcome to the Red Mounds of Redmond, Utah. This is a pretty cool place. I've been coming here since I was, 6 or 7 years old, but I mean, it doesn't look like much maybe. In fact, maybe it looks like a junkyard a little bit. There is a lot of garbage out here, and people ride their bikes around and tear up the hillsides pretty extensively out here. But this is kind of a unique spot, a very unique spot actually. This is the South Mound, and you can't see the farthest one, but this is the middle mound. So there's 3 mounds here. What I find really interesting, well, there's technically more than 3 mounds. There's these smaller satellite hillsides here, but nonetheless, this whole area has been pretty extensively excavated. And here you can see it's an actual open pit quarry. It's not very big, but a lot of earth was moved out of this area, and there's deep gouges out of the hillside where material's been removed. Now, the primary component of this material here is, well, this is a kind of a low quality, low grade, but this is all bentonite clay. And obviously there's rocks and sand and other stuff in here. There's much purer deposits of this bentonite throughout this area right here. And, some of the more interesting things about this are beyond the bentonite itself, which is a medicinal, well, it has a lot of medicinal purposes and practical purposes for building ponds and plugging wells and things of that nature. But as we get a little more into the heart of this here, you start seeing this more white to gray colored bentonite. So this is a much purer material right here, and this stuff can definitely be reconstituted and purified a little bit more. But all this right here is just pretty much pure bentonite, and this is actually some of the purest bentonite in the world. So this is I'm not sure who historically owned it, but not too far north of us here, there's a big salt mine they call the Redmond salt mine, or the real salt mine. And they also mine this bentonite and sell it under the same brand, or the same company name. But, again, besides the bentonite itself, here's an example of what I'm about to show you. And it's not a very good example. I don't know if I can get a clear picture of it. But what this is a banded travertine, or a calcite, calcium carbonate. But it forms in layers, and I'll show you some better examples. But we have a lot of these different bands of travertine, and it's beautiful stuff. Some of it has these little pockets of calcite and quartz crystals, little vugs full of calcite there, and just a wide variety of colors. Pretty much every color in the rainbow can be found in the rocks out here. And you'll notice right here, I'm walking on a dried up clay pit. So, this was obviously a bigger hole that is slowly filled in with clay and sediment, and usually this is full of water. But if you tried to walk out into the middle of that, you might find yourself stuck in it like quicksand. It's pretty nasty stuff. You can see how my feet are sinking into that. You don't want to walk out in the middle of there, I promise you. And you don't even want to try and drive it. You'll just get a 6-foot layer of mud stuck to your tires, and you'll just be spinning and going nowhere. So anyway, I'm slowly bringing you up over to here because something rather interesting about it. The mineralization of the rock, or the hillside here. Again, most of what we're walking on here is just primarily bentonite, which is a volcanic ash, which there's a couple of sources for this volcanic ash, potentially, including the San Rafael swell and the Cedar Springs supervolcano. But, you know, we're in the middle of a geological hotspot right here in Sevier County. But looking up this hill right here, well, this is a ramp, obviously, that trucks would have used to get down into the pit and work and mine this area. So this is like a ramp that they cut down, or a bench. But you can tell that this was the actual, like, this isn't like built up from their waste dumps or overburden. This is actually just the contour that they cut out of the hill. And I know this because I can still see veins, these harder outcroppings, which I'll show you a little farther up how silicated and mineralized these veins are. And this is kind of the bottom of it where I can see it, but no doubt this vein actually runs all the way down through and probably even a mile away from this place. And here's another parallel vein to it. I mean, you can see this brownish red mineralization to it, little bits of iron. In fact, if I come down here just a little bit into these washes, these small cutouts, and come right down here where the water starts to flow out, you can actually see that there's black sands, so evidence of iron. That, you know, you can find this black sand all over the hill here, which the presence of iron is pretty obvious. You know, this is all deeply saturated with iron all the way up to the top of the hill there. And then some of these other, travertine and silicated agate materials. There's a strong presence of iron throughout every bit of the rock out here. The clay, it's a little bit less obvious, but this clay pretty much contains every trace element you can imagine. And we're talking in, you know, trace amounts, but it's there. And so this bentonite is actually sometimes used as a mineral supplement. But yeah, here you can see how this is kind of like a moss agate or something of the sort. There's a lot of different colors. I'm hoping you can see that okay. But the coloration in there, you know, yellow, white, red. There's, you know, dark black, almost transparent. You know, there's a wide variety of colors and interesting patterns. It's really quite beautiful stuff. It's just hard to find good high quality pieces that you can cut, but I have found a few nice pieces of the sort. And again, this vein, multiple veins actually. So there's this vein here, right here, and it kind of comes and goes, you know, it appears and disappears. There's like a little piece of some nice moss agate there. That's part of the vein. This is all part of the outcropping sticking out of the ground here. It goes all the way down. And again, looking back up, our vein is right here. And then there's another, you can see a dark line there. That dark line, that dark line is part of the vein, and it comes down to right here. This vein right here, you can see, is quite full of mineralization, iron especially. There's these kind of limonite rusty golden brown colors to red. And this is, quartz silica. It's a cryptocrystalline agate type material. It's very broken and shattered, brecciated, you could say. So, I mean, it's very mineralized. And again, here it gets into a nice thick vein section here. And again, this vein follows all the way up the hill here. So it's going right here, something like that. But you can also see, maybe, I hope, how there's like striations of this dark colored earthen material, such as right here and here. And the veins are occurring in these dark streaks. So obviously there was some kind of fissure system that came up right here. Now we're getting into the good section of the vein here, where the material is a little more high quality. It's more cryptocrystalline. You can see some more like pinks and reds and tight banding. That's actually really beautiful right there. This here. So, and then this moss agate, it's really hard to give it justice in pictures. You almost have to look at it under a loupe to really see how fine the details are. It's really beautiful stuff. A lot of it is mostly this yellow, but that is a moss agate. I found little bits of green and red and different colors. Now here, a very thick band of this yellow moss agate. It's more like a jasp agate, as they'd call it, or a jasper agate, up in these more solid sections, but it turns into like a banded agate in certain spots. But pretty interesting stuff. And this capstone here is silicated. I can see little clear windows of agate, or chalcedony, but I don't see a lot of color in it. But it is silicated. And we can see actually from this perspective right here that this vein is sitting at a slight angle. I would say about 30 degrees, something like that. So it's got a slight dip to it, which makes me think a number of things could have happened here. Either that the fissure system was coming in at an incline, or more probable is that this is actually this is showing us that the area has block faulted, so that there was some kind of shifting from, say either a 90-degree angle or a 180-degree angle, but it's shifted to the current angle that it's at. And there's possibly more evidence for that up here that I will show you. But we have, one of these nice little pieces of this jasp agate, moss agate. Pretty stuff. Now, if we keep coming up here, the rocks that you're seeing on the ground here, this is all travertine. Sorry if the wind is bad. I'm trying to keep it angled out of the wind, but this is a travertine, calcium carbonate. It's composed of calcite and aragonite. And it's very colorful stuff. There's a lot of banding. So you might call it a banded travertine. Trying to find some really good examples here. Because there are some beautiful pieces out here. Here, like this one. This has some nice banding to it and a lot of different colors. from, you know, this peach pink to purple and gold and white. A lot of different colors. I've seen black and, you know, vivid purples, and, you know, such as this here. You can see a little bit of the purple on top here going into oranges and reds and yellows. And some of these will have vugs with crystals in them, such as a piece, well, it's crystallized, but the crystals are deformed and pseudomorphed, it seems. But there's better examples around. Here we go. This is a dogtooth calcite inside of this vug right there. See right there. Well, actually, from here, it's hard to tell where the travertine layers are, but there's layers of this travertine throughout the hillside. And this travertine, again, being deposited as like a banded layered formation, it's actually indicating that these were formed by calcium carbonate rich hot springs. In some cases, you'll even find fibrous looking contents in these rocks, which are, you know, replaced with calcite, but things that kind of resemble wood or sticks or, you know, small plants, things like that. But there's a lot of interesting things to find out here. I have seen a piece of petrified wood as well from kind of the waste dump of mine up on the north end. So there's fossils and things out here. They're not abundant and they're not, you know, they're not common, but they are out here. And I believe that in some cases, you know, the travertine is actually containing small fragments of plant fossils and who knows what else. Yeah, you can see some of the really strange details, the banding, the pockets that are, you know, cryptocrystalline lined, or, you know, druzy lined pockets. There's a lot of interesting characteristics to these rocks. Like I say, a lot of small pockets and vugs, and some of them have nicely formed crystals inside of them. I've also found banded blue agates and fire agate, or, well, more like a botryoidal carnelians and things like that. There's quite a variety of different rocks that it can be found right in this area. So it's really an interesting place. The geology is, the geological history is fascinating. I mean, I'm not sure that I have my story completely 100% straight on how these mounds came to be, but my understanding of it is that there was well, essentially the Sevier orogeny, which is a term for an event that took place which formed the Wasatch Plateau, which you can see in the distance there. It is raining pretty hard up there. So the Wasatch Plateau was created as a result of the Sevier orogeny. And see, right where we're at is the Sevier Valley in Sevier County, Utah. To the far south end of the valley is Sevier Canyon, and you can see some very interesting geological formations in that area. But this entire area is basically, this valley is kind of a subduction zone going under the Wasatch Plateau. And, you know, as a result of all this tectonic movement, there was also a lot of volcanic activity. And there's volcanic, you know, hot springs even still to this day that are in and around this valley, such as the Monroe Hot Springs and the Meadow Hot Springs, the Baker Hot Springs, not too terribly far away. And we're also in between two major volcanic events, one being the Cedar Springs caldera, which is allegedly a supervolcano that was 4 times the size of Yellowstone, if you can believe that. 120 miles in diameter. It stretches essentially from the other side of this range right here. This is the Pashant Range. And just on the opposite side, you have the Sevier Desert. And the Sevier Desert stretches all the way over into the Great Basin of Nevada. So we're pretty much in the center of the state here. And this stretches all the way from here all the way to a little bit over the Nevada state line. So if that gives you some kind of perspective on how big of a volcanic supervolcano that we're talking about here. And then on the other side of the Wasatch Plateau, you have, sorry about the wind, you have the San Rafael Swell, which was another major volcanic uplift that occurred as a result of the Sevier and possibly the Laramide orogeny. So 2 major land building events that squeezed all this rock in the middle of the Utah desert, which at the time was actually a major inland ocean called the Western Interior Seaway. And that went all the way from the Gulf of Mexico all the way to the Arctic Ocean. So it was a major inland ocean about 40 to 60 million years ago during the Cretaceous period. And the San Rafael Swell, along with the Sevier and the Laramide orogeny, uplifted this the entire region, pretty much the entire central part of the western interior United States. And, you know, the Laramide orogeny also is what built the entire Rocky Mountain range all the way up in Canada. So these were major events. You know, we're talking major subductions of tectonic plates uplifting an entire continent. And this is pretty much the epicenter. Okay, so if you can imagine all that going on between about 60 and 40 million years ago. All this was happening all at once, more or less. Well, not all of that. I'm not sure when the Cedar Springs volcano collapsed, but it all seems like it happened in a relatively short time frame, you know, a 20 to 30 million year time frame. And this area right here kind of sat at the heart of all of that activity. And so these red mounds, what's also interesting to note is, you know, as this Western Interior Seaway receded, it left behind Lake Bonneville, which is now today receded down to what we call the Great Salt Lake, or Great Salt Lake. And this is part of an extension of, you know, the flood basin that would have been Lake Bonneville. So underneath the soil here, underneath all this bentonite, and in some cases it's more than a mile down, but there is a thick salt deposit, which I've heard is thousands of feet thick, and it's pretty much solid salt. But salt has some very interesting characteristics. It tends to move and buckle, and it becomes fluid at times and then recrystallizes, and it does a lot of interesting things. So when you're talking about a massive salt deposit like this, generally those salt deposits actually tend to create like a dome, and they kind of uplift themselves. But at the same time, this area is riddled with fault lines, many of which are still active to this day. They don't move much, but they move just enough to be recorded in some cases, not that you're going to feel it, but they can be recorded. And there's been a lot of seismic testing in this area. There's many major fault lines in the vicinity, such as the Wasatch Anticline, right over on the ridge of the mountain there. And that is a major fault. anticline right there, where if that slipped, it could be just devastating with something like the San Andreas Fault. And this particular Wasatch anticline basically points and directs itself directly under Yellowstone. So you could do the math there. If you have a major fault pointing into a supervolcano that is slipping in a north to south direction, you're essentially feeding the supervolcano. You're putting it under higher levels of pressure. Just to kind of summarize and sum things up, we have these giant domes, these mounds. This one here is not considered one of the main three. It's kind of I call it a satellite to the South Dome here. So these have bands or layers of travertine within them. As we could see down below with those more silicated veins, how there's potential that this area has block faulted or been moved in a different angle due to tectonic movement. Okay, there is some interesting things to look at on this dome. More of those silicated veins and outcroppings of travertine, especially up towards the top, as well as some rather interesting quartzite type material that's very rich in iron and almost cemented with iron. But the reason I wanted to show you this hill right here, you can see the outcropping at the top of it and the angle of this hill, where the hill seems to be rising gently up to its summit, and then we see a sharp outcropping. Again, very sorry about the wind, but we see this sharp outcropping and how it drops off kind of suddenly on this other side. And if I went up there, which I don't really feel like it right now, but if I went up there, you'd see more clearly than what you can see here how the rock is lifted up at an angle, again almost the same angle as some of our veins down at the bottom of that ramp over there. So in fact, it seems like it's at the exact same angle and pointing in the same direction. So we can infer from all this that these hills have been block faulted, let's see, an uplift in a northeast direction at about, I'm going to call that a 30-degree dip. So that block faulting has essentially created this hill right here, and erosion has played a huge role in the disappearance of everything out this way. So everything's just kind of eroded over time. Anyway, this is the Redmond mound. I don't know what they called this pit or this quarry, but this is one of the bentonite mines. And an interesting thing to note here, and I meant to talk about this way earlier, is this bentonite, as well as the salt that is in this area, has been mined historically in this exact location for potentially thousands of years. So the Paiute, today a lot of what we call the Navajo or the Diné tribe, they mined this bentonite and the salt, and the Spaniards came along, then they started mining it. So this has been a very significant spot for a very long time to a lot of different people, and even still to this day, this is a major industrial mining operation to the north. So anyway, I'm gonna leave it there. I got company, so much love, enjoy.